Hey guys, we're just going to go over the warm-up real quick. So in this first one, we have a -11 and a -7. Combining a negative and 11 and a -7. When you have two negatives together, you're just going to combine them. That just gives you a -18. When you have a -11 minus a -11, when you have two negatives right there, right next to each other, negative minus a negative, you can just add the opposite or keep change opposite. So that's -11 plus 11, which is just going to give you 0. When you have a 16 here and a -1/2, multiplying that 1/2 times that 16 is basically our priority, which half of 16 is just going to give you 8. And then when you have a negative times a positive, of course, you're going to get a negative as an answer. If you're ever multiplying two things and one of them is a negative, your answer is going to be a negative. Here, though, we have a negative divided by a negative, and a negative divided by a negative should be a positive. So we know our answer is going to be positive either way, so we can basically ignore these negative signs. And then 64 divided by 8 is just 8. In this last one, we have to be careful with all these negatives as well. If you want to make sure you don't lose track of negatives, you can always keep change opposite whenever you see a negative sign. So if I see the subtracting a negative right here on that 15, I automatically know that I'm going to keep change opposite or at the opposite. You could do the same thing with this 4 to make sure you know that that negative goes with that 4. Whenever you see a subtraction sign in front of a number, it really just means that number is negative. So then you can just combine these left to right because we're adding and subtracting. We're just combining things. So we have a -5 and a positive 15. That's going to give you a 10. 17 minus a 4 because it's plus a -4. That's going to give you a 13. And then we have that plus a 15 as well. So now I can just combine everything that I have already. So that's a 23 plus a 15, and 23 plus 15 gives you a 38 as your final answer. Now we're going to dive into some expressions and combining like terms. So it's important that you understand the difference between an expression and an equation. So an expression is where we have a sentence of minimum of two numbers and at least one math operation. So it's going to have addition, subtraction, multiplication. Sometimes it's going to have a bunch. Sometimes it's only going to have one. And it really doesn't matter as long as you understand that an expression doesn't have a equal sign. An expression is just one side of our equal sign, and we're typically just combining some like terms there. Well, that jumps into our like terms. So what are like terms? Well, like terms are terms whose variables and their exponents are the same. So that's important, the exponents, because numbers like x and x squared, these are not like terms. X is not the same thing as x squared. These are not the same. However, if I had like 3x and a 4x, well, since they both have an x, then we can combine them to get a 7x. Those are like terms. And our equation, of course, is a mathematical statement containing two algebraic expressions. So there's two sides of our equal sign, where both sides of the equal, it has an equal sign. There's two sides that are equal to each other. That's what an equation is. And then I also threw in DCMAM. They don't really teach this explicitly at the high school, I don't think, but it is important to remember, because if you remember to distribute, combine your like terms, move your variable, add or subtract, and then multiply or divide, you will solve any equation, which is super helpful. Let's go ahead and dive into certain types of expressions that we're going to have to simplify. We'll deal with equations probably in the next few days, but we're going to start with expressions and combining our like terms to make sure we know what we're doing. So 3x minus 5 plus 5x. It might be tempting to combine the 5s because they're both 5. But however, one of those 5s has an x on it and the other one does not. So we have to combine 3x and a 5x. So we can combine these two because they're like terms. So I do 3 plus a 5x because they're both positive, and I get an 8x. And I just drop down this minus 5 because it doesn't go with anything else. So 8x minus 5 would be our final answer there. Here, we're going to have to actually isolate what is the same. So we have a 14x and a minus 4x, and we have a 17y and a minus 7y. So to combine these, you can keep track of underlining and circling or boxing things that you need, or circling certain like terms. but something to make sure that you keep track of what combines with what will make sure that you limit any mistakes. So a 14x, and that is a negative 4x because it has a subtraction sign in front of it. So 14x minus 4x is going to give us a 10x here. And then a 17y and a minus 7y, again, we're subtracting because of this negative sign in front of that 7y. And it's a 17y minus 7y is going to give you a positive 10y. Now I can't combine that 10x and that 10y, even though they're both 10, because one has an x on it and one has a y on it. This third problem, really just dives into we're still going to have to distribute. You're still going to have to do some math here to get things into their simplest form. So 1/2 distributing to both of these terms, because whenever you see something in front of a parenthesis, you're distributing it to both terms. Well, half of 4 is just 2. So you just do that normally, except this 4 has an x on it. So because of that, we are going to make sure that we add in an x on our 2. Half of 6 is going to be 3, and that was a negative 6, so this is a negative 3. Makes sense. Now I have minus x plus 3, and now we're just back to the first two problems that we solved, just combining some like terms. So I have a 2x minus x, well 2 minus 1, because this negative x has an invisible 1 out front, so it's really saying 2 minus 1 is just a 1x, which I can just write as x. And then minus 3, positive 3, well negative 3 plus 3 is just 0, so our answer here is just x. Or you could say x plus 0, both of those are the same thing, you can say either one. This one is a problem that messes up students so much because the most common mistake in algebra is negatives. So let's distribute this negative. We have a negative on this x and a negative on this 13, which remember that 13 has a negative out front. So negative times x, because this is really a negative 1. So it's negative 1 times x, which gives you a negative 1x, which I can just write negative x. A negative 1 times a negative 13, however, remember, negative times a negative, we get a positive 13. I know that might seem pretty simple, but it's easy to mistake. So getting some practice with that will help you limit those mistakes and help you ace algebra. Go ahead and do that activity for today, and I'll hope to see you tomorrow. See ya.